Over the weekend, it finally happened. After months of negotiations between both halves of Congress, President Biden's $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill has finally been passed into law. With the passing of this bill, billions of dollars are now going to be given to states so that they can work on their infrastructure. This is anything from roads and bridges to education and even water sources. Now that the infrastructure bill has been passed into law, we can finally talk about what exactly is in it. Where did it come from? What are some of the things that this bill proposes? And how is the money going to be spent? I also want to discuss what this new infrastructure bill could mean for you and who exactly is going to be paying for all of these new changes. So be sure to stick around till the very end of this video to learn everything you need to know about this infrastructure package and who is going to pay for it. But before we get into all of that, my name is Nate from Minority Mindset News, and if you like this video, make sure to smash that thumbs up button below and hit that notification bell too. That way YouTube shows our videos to way more money minds around the world, and we can keep making videos just like this one. Let's talk about bills for a second, and not the type that you get in the mail. Bills are just proposals that Congress comes up with, so it is a plan to do something within the United States. In order for a bill to be passed, it needs to go through the House of Representatives and the Senate, both bodies of Congress. One part of Congress will introduce the bill, and then if it's passed in that part of Congress, it will send the bill to the other half. The other half can approve it as is or make changes and approve it and then send it back to the other half to approve those new changes. As you can probably imagine, this can lead to months of deliberations, which is exactly what happened with this infrastructure bill. One of the biggest moments of contention when it comes to introducing new bills is who exactly is going to pay for it and how. More often than not, that comes down to the US taxpayers. The US government is a non-profit entity, so the only way that it makes money and the only way it can get money to fund its bills is by taxing you. Taxing basically means that the federal government is taking money from American citizens in order to fund its programs. The taxing comes retroactively though, because when a bill is initially passed, the federal government puts up all of the money for that bill almost right away. So for instance, if the federal government needs $1 trillion, it will essentially print $1 trillion over a specific period of time. The Federal Reserve will issue a printing notice to the Treasury, and then the Treasury will print those dollars and distribute them throughout the United States. So the money is then created and then spent on whatever the federal government needs it to be spent on. But afterwards, Americans are then taxed so the money can go back to the federal government so they can continue to fund more programs. And once a bill has passed both the House of Representatives and the Senate, and they both agree on all of the changes that have been made, it then goes to the president, who in this case is Joe Biden. Over the weekend, Joe Biden put the last and final signature on this bill, and it is now a law. Meaning, the money printing can now begin again. More money printing. That sounds pretty familiar. Well, if you've watched this channel over the last year and a half, we've talked a lot about money printing, specifically what money printing can do to our economy and our financial future. And over the last year and a half, the US government has printed around $3 to $5 trillion. That means that around 20% of all of the US dollars that have ever been printed were created in 2020 and in parts of 2021. That is a ton of money. And the thing is, the US government isn't the one that pays the price for all of this additional money printing. The one who pays the price is you. And in this case, it looks like Americans are going to be paying twice. As more money is printed, that means there's more money in circulation. As there's more money in circulation, the value of all of the existing dollars ultimately goes down. That means you can buy less with the dollars that you currently have. If there's only $100 in circulation and you have $1 of that $100, you have 1% of all of the money throughout the United States. But if the Federal Reserve decides that it needs 100 more dollars, well, now there's $200 circulating throughout the US, and your money is now worth less. Everything will ultimately need to go up. And the reason for this is because more people have more access to money. When people have more access to money, they tend to buy more things. If they're buying more things, that means more things need to be produced. If more things need to be produced, that means companies have to figure out a way to produce more things. And all of that costs money. So they're going to have to pay more, and ultimately they're going to trickle this cost down to you. That means that everything you buy is going to cost more as more people buy more things. This is what's known as inflation. And recently, the Consumer Price Index was released, and it showed that inflation has increased by around 5.4% over the last few months. Typically, inflation rises by around 2 to 3%. So currently, inflation is almost double what it normally is. Things are costing way more because the federal government has printed around $3 to $5 trillion over the last 2 years. A lot of this money was printed in order to keep America afloat. A lot of Americans were out of jobs because a lot of industries were closed down. If there are fewer Americans buying fewer things, that means companies are getting less money too. That means that our entire economy has a lot less money going around. So the Federal Reserve decided that it needed to print a ton of money in order to put direct payments into Americans' pockets while they weren't making any money. So we had stimulus payments and unemployment benefits across the nation. These were added benefits on top of your state benefits. Americans were getting free money, and then a lot of them went out and spent a lot of this money. This ultimately contributed to our current supply chain issues. And that has caused the price of things to become even more inflated. And it looks like the federal government is about to do it again. They don't have $1.2 trillion just lying around, so they're going to need to create it. And Americans will ultimately pay the price for all of this money printing, at least indirectly through inflation. So that is the first way that Americans will most likely pay for this new infrastructure program. The second way is through taxing. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit funky because some reports are saying that this new infrastructure bill is currently funded. Some reports are saying that this new infrastructure bill is only half funded. And what I mean by this is that the current taxes that we have in place could fund around half of this infrastructure bill. So now you have a ton of senators and representatives coming out to say that this bill is already paid for, and then they can pass it without raising taxes. And at first, this might have been the case, but now this new and completed infrastructure program exceeds the original amount by around $550 billion. Right now, the direct financing plan for this new infrastructure program is going to come in a variety of different ways. The first way is that Congress plans to use a lot of the unspent funds that we printed last year during the 2020 pandemic. So in essence, any of the funds that were left over from COVID-19 relief are now going to be reallocated towards this new program. In addition, Congress is now talking about strengthening its code on taxing cryptocurrencies. Right now, cryptocurrencies are taxed as a property in the United States, meaning that investors are only taxed on them for the realized gains. If you actually lose money on your cryptocurrency investment, meaning that what it's valued at today is a lot lower than what you bought it for, you might not have to pay any taxes on that investment. But if you actually made a profit on your cryptocurrency investment, meaning that what it's valued at today is a lot more than what you bought it at previously, you will most likely have to pay some sort of capital gains tax. Capital gains taxes can vary depending on how long you've owned an asset and what your current income level is. But the bottom line here is that the federal government is going to look into ways to tax cryptocurrency more in order to fund this new program. Nothing has been set in stone yet, but in order to get this financing through, they're going to have to come up with some plans very soon. The funding for this new infrastructure bill is supposed to be distributed throughout the United States over the next 8 years. So within the next decade or so, we may see a ton of new changes in the cryptocurrency industry. On the flip side though, the stock market has gone green over the announcement that this new infrastructure package has been passed. This is because Wall Street loves when the government prints more money. Like we saw in 2020, the stock market loves when more money is in circulation throughout the economy because that means people have more money to spend. When people have more money to spend, they typically buy things with it. And when they buy things, that means companies are making a lot more money. If companies are making a lot more money, that means stock prices are going to go up. Obviously, none of that is a guarantee, but this is what typically happens when the government prints a lot more money. And this infrastructure bill in particular is kind of an interesting one, because in order for a lot of these things to get done, the government is going to have to rely on private industries. Recently, an ETF was created that brings together all of the companies that are going to be a part of this new infrastructure program. And now, investors are piling in on this new ETF, and investors are individually investing in these companies. This means a sudden and big boost for some companies that have been struggling over the last 2 years or so. And it also means that Wall Street is turning green on this announcement. A lot of these companies are going to help push these major indexes up further while this money is distributed. But now I want to show you everything that is in this bill and where all of this money is going. Here is everything that the $1.2 trillion is going to go towards, and here is all of the spending broken down. I have a list of everything right in front of me, and I'm going to be reading directly off my computer. That way I don't get anything wrong. So without further ado, here is the total budget breakdown. Roads, bridges, and other major projects are going to get $110 billion. In addition, it looks like passenger and freight rail is going to go up by around $66 billion. Public transit has around $39 billion allocated towards it. Airports get $25 billion. Port infrastructure is going to get $17 billion. Transportation safety programs are getting $11 billion. Electric vehicles, $7.5 billion. Zero and low emission buses and ferries, $7.5 billion as well. And finally, revitalization of communities, $1.5 billion. Other types of infrastructure is going to be broadband internet, which is getting $65 billion. Power infrastructure is getting $73 billion. Clean drinking water throughout the United States is also getting around $55 billion. Resilience and Western water storage, $50 billion, and removal of pollution from water and soil, around $21 billion. And like I said, all of this money is going to be allocated over the next 8 years, and this entire infrastructure program to be completed is going to take a very long time. And each one of those items on that list will probably be broken down in a later video, as I don't think we have time for it today. But the bottom line here is that the US government is printing $1.2 trillion in order to improve America's infrastructure. Things like our roads and bridges and water supply and the access that we have to all of those is going to be improved for future generations, and even our digital aspects as well, like broadband internet. It's also very clear that the United States is switching to an electric vehicle model, so that means we're going to need new charging ports all throughout the United States. But this new $1.2 trillion infrastructure program is not free. More than likely, American citizens are going to have to pay for this in the form of taxes. As of right now, the federal government has not said whether we are going to experience new taxes or if our current taxes are just going to be reallocated into this new program. But either way, if something is pulled from somewhere else, that means that thing is not being funded how it should be just to support this new program. So taxes ultimately are going to need to shift. Most likely though, Americans will face some kind of inflation on our money within the next few years. It all comes down to how this money is spent and how much is actually printed every single year. But thinking in terms of right now, President Biden's infrastructure program has moved forward. And now that it's passed into law, a lot of things can happen next. And a lot of changes are coming for what looks like cryptocurrency, the stock market, and our American economy. How much things actually change, though, is still yet to be seen. But now I want to hear from you on this issue. What do you think about this new infrastructure program, and what do you think about the US government printing another $1.2 trillion? Is this new infrastructure program totally worth it, or is all of this money printing ultimately just going to hurt the United States? Whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. That is it for today's business and financial news breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button below. Keep hustling, money minds, and I'll see you all in the next one.